crazy father assaulted me over a casserole and he got away with it. So this is something that happened to me a long time ago, and something I've debated putting online like this. But I've decided that people need to know how horrible my father is. This is something I've told close friends before, and this is the first, but certainly not the only horrible event regarding my father. Also note that this is the farthest back I can remember. Context. I am a 28 turning 29 next month, and this took place when I was very little, either 4 or 5 years old. It was in the summer just before my 5th or 6th birthday. At the time, my parents' younger brother, who was a baby at the time, and I were living in a middle-of-nowhere town close to family members. Dad worked a job and my mum was the stay-at-home wife, aka the typical family dynamic of the 90s and beginning of 2000s. During this particular day, my mum was doing errands with my grandma, her mom, and brought my brother with her, so it was just my dad and I. A co-worker of his was camping at a nearby campground that we frequently visited when we lived there, and my dad decided to get the camper trailer and camp out that weekend. We get there and I'm invited to play with the other kids, including the 2 boys of the co-worker, who were either my age or a bit older than me. There was a nearby creek that was a popular swimming area for the kids, in spite of the potential cottonmouth snake, but being in the southern USA, you're taught at a very young age to always keep an eye out for snakes. I bring this up because I loved to swim as a kid, and my dad strictly told me to not get close to the creek because he didn't want me swimming just yet. There was a pool not far from the campground that I believe he was planning on taking me until things went south. However, while I was playing with the kids, I ended up tripping on a rock and tumbling into said creek and getting completely drenched. I was, and still am, a great swimmer, and the creek wasn't really deep, so I wasn't in any danger, but I was afraid my dad would be mad. The co-workers' kids were willing to vouch for me that I fell in by accident. We went to my dad's trailer, and sure enough, he immediately got mad, yelling at me that I wasn't supposed to go swimming. Although this is the farthest I remember back, I know that even then I was scared of him when he was mad, and I ended up being quiet as you couldn't say anything when he was mad without making the situation worse. The 2 boys fulfilled their promise to try and defend me, telling my dad it was an accident, only for my dad to tell them both to scram as he dragged me inside. I was tossed into the bathroom, as in literally thrown inside, with a towel and some dry clothes and told me to quickly change. I did so without saying a single word. Even after I did what was told, he was still fuming. We were going to the co-worker's trailer for lunch, and my dad threatened me, or as he would say, promised. As he said, all his threats were promises because he always intended to act out on his threats, that if I screw up one more time, I'll regret it. At the co-worker's trailer, the lunch was some kind of casserole. Like many kids, I was, and still am to some extent, a picky eater, so I already decided I wasn't hungry. But it took one glare of pure anger from my dad to get me to start eating. Within a couple bites, I was getting nauseous, and I put the fork down and said I was no longer hungry. My dad flipped. He immediately started screaming at me to eat every bite of the casserole, and that I wasn't leaving that spot until I did so. The co-worker, bless his heart, tried to be a mediator by saying I didn't have to eat the food if I didn't like it, and that he has no problem making me a sandwich. My dad told him to shut the fuck up, and threatened to sock him if he said another word. The next 5 minutes was me bawling my eyes out, slowly eating the casserole as my dad was screaming right next to my ear about how he's going to beat the shit out of me if I didn't do what he says. 4th bite in, my stomach turned, and I fell off the chair and threw up. I felt him grab me by the hair and dragging me to the trailer, me wailing for him to not be mad at me. I will note that my parents were the type of parents to have a wooden paddle for spanking, but at the time it was only my mom who had the paddle, as she had enough restraint to make sure I didn't feel anything more than a slight sting to get the point across for why I was in trouble. And my dad proved he had zero restraint. As he yanked my pants off and swung the first blow, it was an agonizing strike that was so strong I immediately stopped crying and felt numb, like he smacked all senses out of me. He swung a second time and I blacked out. The rest happened from the testimony of my grandma, as I was unconscious for 2 hours. While I was getting struck, my co-worker called my mom in a panic, telling her to go to the campgrounds immediately, fearing for the well-being of myself. My mom and grandma immediately drove from their destination, a little over an hour and a half drive to the campground. Unfortunately, my dad stormed out after striking me several times in blind fury and threatened to beat the crap out of the co-worker and his kids if they ever mentioned what they witnessed, and the co-worker fled. I don't know if my dad attempted to hurt the co-worker and his kids, but considering how bloodthirsty he was, I wouldn't be surprised. My mom and grandma pulled up to see my dad sitting on a chair in front of the trailer, still fuming. He immediately told them both that I got what I deserved, and I was making him look bad. They both went into the trailer to see me face down, pants off, bottom of my back to the upper half of my thighs nearly black from bruising. My mum thought I was dead, and it took my grandma finding my pulse to find out that I was still alive, just unconscious. My grandma floored it to the town's police station. There was no service for phones in that area at the time, and my mum stayed behind to make sure my dad didn't try to hurt me any further. That's when I regained conscious and saw my grandma driving off. Thing is, my dad had no remorse for what he did, even saying that he couldn't care less if he killed me or not. He didn't even bother to check if I was still alive after continuously striking me until the cops were involved. He went inside and laid out a sob story about how he didn't mean to hurt me like that, and Dad always love you, bud. Being the innocent kid I was, I believed him, but now I know it was just a lie to relieve himself of guilt. I wish I could say that he went to prison and I never had to deal with him again, but that wasn't the case. My mum did have plans to fully divorce him and hold all charges on him, but when she visited him in the county jail, he thoroughly convinced her that she couldn't afford the divorce, which my mum confirmed was true, and that my brother and I can't survive without him. Not to mention how she would be a social outcast for being a single mom. IDK how true this was. But this was the very end of the 90s/ just before 2000. He also laid it thick that even in the case she got her kids away from him, my dad will not rest until he killed her and took my brother and I to where nobody would ever see us again. My mum tried to remain brave, but the threats worked, mostly due to how he was back to having no remorse over what he did to me. He was just upset he got caught. So my mum dropped the charges, and she still lived with him until I was turning 11. However, the whole family was well aware of what he did, and they made it clear if he hurt me like that again, or hurt my mum and brother like that, they will not hesitate to call the cops. The only thing that managed to do was make my dad much smarter about how to abuse us, sticking more to scaring the daylights out of us, and making us feel like accidents who nobody loves with his words than bruising us up with his fists. And when he did physically hurt my mum, brother and I, he did so in ways that could be covered up. As for how he is today, he's not as physically aggressive as he used to be, but he's become even more heartless and unfiltered on his words, and continues to believe that he does no wrong, and even has the right to hurt his kids, even when said kids are now adults. I have much more to say about the crap this monster has done, and I might tell more of what he's done to me in my life. But for now, I just wanted to say how he assaulted me over a fudging casserole, and how he managed to get away with it. Freddie here. Sorry this happened to you. Not all parents are monsters, just some of them. I hope you are in therapy or will get therapy for this. It helped me a lot, even though it can't take the nightmares away. I would suggest you go no contact for your own health and mental well-being. Good luck.